Hello friends, welcome to Code Semantic and welcome to the video tutorial of ASP.NET MVC file. In today's video, we are going to study a model binding, which is very important topic in MVC. And models also get introduced from this point onwards. Till now, whatever we study, it do not involve a model. It only involves controllers and views. Okay, so from this point onwards, model also get involved in a uh, tutorial. Okay, so let us see what is model binding. But before switching to model binding, there is one more way to collect the data from your request. So that particular way is called as traditional way, and in traditional way you can get the HTTP request value in action methods are using query string for HttpGET request and request.form for HttpPOST request. Now accessing these values using request object is cumbersome and time wasting activity. Why? Because we need to do a typecasting. We have to write lots of code. That's why it is cumbersome and time wasting. Now there is one more way also. You can use form collection parameter also in your action method, okay, to retrieve all the values of your form field. Okay, so for form if you have form fields, in that case you can use form collection also. Now the second method that MVC has given is more effective and it is more preferred, and which is called as model binding. So model binding is also used to get a request values, but what it does, it converts the HTTP request values to action method parameter. Okay, see, mark this word, converts. So in traditional way we have to do lots of coding, okay, as well as we have to do type conversion also. But in model binding, it automatically converts our HTTP request value. Now that request value can be from query string or can be a form collection, and it automatically map it to our action method parameter. Now our action method parameters can be primitive type and can be of complex type. Primitive type means what? Data types given by the language like integer, float, string. These are called as primitive type. And complex type means what? Data types created by us, which means a class or structure. Okay, so your action method can accept primitive type as a parameter or complex type as a parameter. So depending on that, also your model binding get divided. So you can do a model binding of your action method with primitive type or complex type. So we already studied the part of model binding to primitive type. Okay, for that you have to watch the video of collecting the request values in action method. So in this video also I'll cover a part of binding to the primitive type. Okay, now what happens in primitive type binding or primitive type model binding? Actually HTTP request embeds data into the query string. Means if your request is HTTP GET request, what it does, it embeds your data in query string. And what MVC framework does, it automatically converts your query string to action method parameters. Okay, so your query string key and your action method parameter get mapped automatically. The condition is that query string name and action method parameter name or action method argument name should match. Now you can have a multiple parameters also of different types. Okay, so again query string values will get converted automatically based on the matching name. This is very important. Now look at this. So here my query string name is ID, and here my parameter name is what? It is also ID. So it automatically get binded here. So this one value get stored in ID, or it is all passed to this parameter. Now here nothing is specified, still this also get collected in ID because this ID parameter is specified as root parameter in our routing file, root config file, in our root config file. So again, those who are not familiar with routing, please watch the video of routing. Okay, so if this id parameter is defined as root parameter in our root config file, then also it get automatically mapped to our action method parameter. Now let us see a binding to complex type. Now here what happens, your MVC framework automatically converts form field data. Okay, form field data. Form means what? Your HTML form. And in HTML form, you define an input field. Okay, so that input field data of HTTP POST request get converted to the properties of your complex type parameter. Now what is complex type? As I told you, it is a class, and in class we define a property. Okay, in C# class we define a property. So what happens? Your form field data automatically get converted to the properties of a complex type, okay, which is a parameter of our action method. Now what is the condition here? The name attribute of our HTML field should be same as the property name of our model. Okay, so the mapping is based on what? Property name by default. So your property name and your HTML field name or name attribute should be same. Now how this happens? Actually your MVC collects the data from HTTP world and it uses default model binder class. What it uses? Internally it uses default model binder class, which magically does all the type conversion and mapping of all these value to our model properties. Now remember this, here model means our class. Model is going to be our class, and we are going to see this practically, so it will be more clear to you. Now if we use model binders, what is the advantage? We don't have to write the conversion and mapping code. Okay, if you are using traditional method, in that case you have to copy each and every value in our property, and before that you have to do conversion also. Okay, so definitely that process get avoided and your code will be much cleaner in controller. Okay, now let us see what happens inside the model binding. See, as I told you, everything happens automatically. Your request values get converted to complex or primitive type. Okay, so basically model binding is two-step process. First it collect the values from the incoming request. Okay, so and then after it get populated into primitive type or complex type. So value providers are responsible for collecting the values and model binders are responsible for populating the values, and then after it will be collected in the action method. So let us see this part practically. So I have one solution created here. So let us see a primitive model binding first, and for that I'm going to add one controller here. MVC5 controller empty, and so let us call our controller as account controller. Okay, I'm sorry, I think this is wrong project get created. Actually not wrong, a VB.NET project get created. Let me create a new project. So Visual C#, and then after to choose web ASP.NET. Let us call a project as model binding. Okay, let me name it as model binding 1 because model binding is already exist. Empty MVC and say okay. Okay, now let us create a controller. My controller name is account controller. Okay, now account controller get created, one index method also get added. So let us name it as login. Let us name it as login, and we will have two methods. This login method will displace the view, and the another login method and another action method will validate that credentials. Okay, so let us create a view first. Say add view. So we are going to use a layout view, that's why I'll tick this option. So okay, now let us create one form. Form method is equal to post and action is equal to /account/login. Okay, I'm going to create overload of our action method. Now inside the form tag, I'll define one label, enter username, line break, and input type is equal to text, name is equal to username. Okay, now again line break, then label. Let me copy this part so we can complete it fast. So enter password, and now input type is password, and let us name it as password. Okay, now there will be one submit button. So input type is equal to submit and value is equal to login. Okay, now whenever I click on this submit button, which action method is going to be called? Account controllers login action method. So let us create an overload of this, and which is, it should be a post method, right? You can create an overload of action method if it is get and post. So public, so let me return a content result. So since we are creating overloading of this method, so there should be a difference in parameter. Now for primitive binding, what will I do? I'll specify a name of parameter of my action method same as of my HTML field name. Okay, so what are that name? Username and password. So string username and string password. Okay, it should match with the name of our HTML tag. Now let us check against static values because we didn't start with database yet. So if username is equal to Scott and password is equal to Tiger. Okay, so let us return a content that welcome Scott. Okay, and in the else part, if it do not match, I'll return a content that sorry whatever there in our text box username. Okay, so this is what, this is a primitive binding. Why primitive binding? Because I used a primitive data type. I used primitive data type. Now let us run this. So actually we do not have a home controller or anything. Our controller name is account and method name is login. Okay, so this method get executed means actually this method get executed and it returns the view. Okay, now I'll put something here, say xxx, and I'll enter password as 123, which is wrong. Now whenever I click here, this second login method get executed because we specified in our form tag which method to execute. Now let us observe the value of username. Look at here. The value of username is what? XXX. Whatever I specified. See, we do not use any request collection and we do not use any traditional methods. Still our value get populated. That is the magic of model binding. It automatically maps our value to our action method parameters. Okay. So it is showing me sorry XXX because username and password is incorrect. Let us try for valid one. Actually, it is not our purpose, but to show you the result only. Okay, here also see your username is Scott and password is Tiger. Now it match and it show you welcome Scott message. Okay, it is working fine. So I hope you understand the primitive model binding. Now actually my focus is to tell you about complex model binding. Okay, because we already studied a primitive model binding in collecting the request values in action method video. Please watch that video for more details. Now as I told you, from this point onwards our models get introduced. Okay, till now we used only controllers and views. Okay, now model get introduced. Now what will I do for complex model binding? I'm going to create one model here. So let us create a model. Now what is a model? Model is nothing but a class which has having some properties, Now let us create a model user. Okay, and let us add some properties here. Now shortcut way to add a property is type prop and tap twice. Okay, now specify your data type, again tap and specify your property name, which is username, prop, tap twice. Okay, then specify your data type and then after your property name. So generally in MVC your model contains a properties only. Okay, so we created this properties, required property field you can mention here. Now what we want to do, instead of collecting these values separately, okay, this is what primitive data type. Instead of collecting these values separately, what we are going to do, we are going to collect it as a model. Okay, in the form of model. And what we did in our model, we specified the property and the name of our properties is exactly same as of our input field name or form field name. That is the only condition for complex model binding. So let us make a change in this method. Okay, so what will I do? I'll just comment this part. Let me copy this first so it will be easy for me to alter it. So let me comment it. So now we are going to study complex model binding. Okay, now here as a parameter I'll accept a complex type. What is it? User. Now let us create an object of it. Now actually our user class is in namespace model binding one.model. So let us import that namespace first here using model binding one.models. Okay, so it get imported. Now this error get resolved. So this model is available here. Now see, actually all your data goes in your model and model has username property. So how you will define it? Model dot username. Okay, now it is not a plain variable or plain parameter. It is a property of your user class or user model. So actually you can define any object name here. Time being specified at model, you can specify you can specify obj, anything. Okay, now here again username property belongs to your model object. Okay, now it is quite simple, right? Now what is the advantage of complex model binding over a primitive model binding, you can have hundreds of fields in your form. Okay, then also your code remains clean. Here, assume that you have 100 fields of your form. So what you have to do? You have to increase that parameters horizontally separated by comma one by one, and it is very unmanageable. But if you create a model of that properties, okay, and collect that entire model, then it will be definitely a feasible and manageable solution, and as well as it is clean. Okay, so let us try this. Okay, so let us run this. So again, I'm going to refresh this page. So let us call account controllers login method, and let us try something. Say xxx, then 123. Click on login. Let us check the model values. See, password is 123 and username is xxx. It automatically get populated. Okay, that is the magic of your model binding. What it does, it populates the value to our model properties. Okay, it is showing the sorry message. Let us try with valid values. Scott and Tiger. Let us check the value of model. Tiger, Scott. Okay, now it is showing a welcome message. Okay, I hope you understand the power of model binding. Okay, now from this point onward, we try to use the model binding, but wherever it is not possible to use a complex model binding, you can go for primitive model binding, or you can use a traditional approach, because in the real project this situation occurs. In that case, we have to use a traditional method also. So don't forget a traditional method. Okay, definitely you will prefer a complex model binding or overall model binding, but traditional model binding is also helpful sometimes. Okay, thank you.